Hi everyone, welcome back to the Speakeasy. I'm Joe Condon. I'm joined by Gabriella Geisinger today, and today our guest is Gray Bright from
Hello everyone.
And Hasbro. Gray, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
And welcome to London, a hot London as we're recording.
Oh, let's talk about that for a moment. Thank you for bringing out the most magical weather. Everyone's out on the street, having lunch, having dinner. Yeah, really great time to be here. Thank you.
Day of recording, it's also the England match tonight, so everyone is. I've seen England shirts at 9 a.m. this morning, so we'll see how that.
It's going to get electric.
It is.
Yep.
It is. Gray, you've been at Hasbro and Sixth Wall now for.
So I joined Hasbro in 2019. When I joined, I was leading the board game design team, and then Sixth Wall is a new entity that we've started within Hasbro. We announced that just a few weeks ago publicly, but we've been working on it for quite some time.
And we will get into that. Maybe we can talk around, or maybe we can get into it now. I guess it's new news, but you've been working on it for quite a few months and years now. So maybe we could talk around that process and what you're doing to bring Hasbro's IP and characters to life.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if we allow ourselves to think back, ChatGPT was sort of late 2022. I think a lot of people just felt the ground move the first time you used it, like, oh, there's something different here. There's something incredible. And at the time, we started early experimentation in how can we use these tools to help maybe through the design and development process, or how can we use this to create new magical experiences within board games? One of the ones that we came across was creating some tools to help ideate new questions for Trivial Pursuit. And then we realized after time, it wasn't really so much a tool, but we started playing this tool. I kept on asking it questions about Back to the Future, and it was just streaming me questions. You could ask it for questions about your favorite sports or exoplanets, and it would give questions. So through that lens, we started to realize, what could this be? So we built more and more experiments, more and more prototypes, and we actually ended up turning that into Trivial Pursuit Infinite. And so for National Trivia Day, we launched this infinite version of Trivial Pursuit where the public could ask questions on any topic they wanted. And it was through these early experiments that we started to realize, if we match up this new technology with the brands, the IP, the experiences that we have, we might be able to deliver new and magical experiences that we've only dreamed of before. So through those early days, we realized something's there. And then there was a fantastic moment. Jim Hayes, software engineer, one day he goes, I think I can speak to dead people. And we're like, what are you talking about, Jim? Hold the phone. What is going on? What he meant was that using an LLM, we could connect it up to the Ouija board so that now you could ask questions of the Ouija board and it would respond. And then he wired up the planchette so that the planchette moved. And over Halloween, we turned on this AI version of Ouija for 72 hours. 250,000 super spooky interactions were had. And it was along these experiments, these moments where we really realized, there is something terrific here. That then progressed, because we couldn't help ourselves, to start thinking, what if we can talk to our characters? And the first characters that we started talking to, well, the first one was an unbranded fox. And it was a character that we put a British accent to, gave it a bit of a personality. But when you heard this fox speak, as lovely as it was, you didn't have an immediate recognition of the voice. You didn't have an immediate recognition of the sentence flow, the structure. What should this fox be saying to me? But we realized there's something there. So then we progressed to Peppa. And once we started talking to a lovely Peppa, and she started talking to us about muddy puddles, we knew, this is incredible. There's something here. So we kept on doing experimentation after experimentation. And interestingly, we've actually decided that in these early days, under 13 experiences aren't where we're going to focus. And that's because through our experiments, we've identified some reasons that we're going to focus on up-aging these experiences first. But it's not through lack of experimentation and learning. And so along that progression from End of 22 through 23, 24, we really started to place a lot of emphasis around what can this mean for the future of IP. And interestingly, we started to realize licensing is not ready for dynamic characters. And the reason for that is traditional licensing allows you to construct deals for where characters arrive, but you're always doing it before the moment. We have to control what these characters do in real time. The moderation, the safety, keep them in canon, in lore. Optimus should really only be speaking about certain things in certain situations. So that's how we came about building what we call the character operating system, and each of these characters has a golden record, which controls the personality, the lore, and allows us to now have these magical experiences in which I speak to Optimus Prime nearly every day. It's one of my favourite sentences, by the way. It makes me so happy.
No, it's so cool. But Hasbro is guardians of some of the most iconic IP that is on the face of the earth.
Yes.
So I guess it's, how have you found that transition of trying to marry up, that IP and what the audience expects with these new technologies and kind of the new experiences that you're delivering?
I think you've hit on such an interesting point on why we believe we're the right company to do this. If you built this technology stack through the lens of a straight technology company, you would miss the inherent 100-year-plus history of having to protect brands. We are, first and foremost, a company that is built on play, built on creating stories and building worlds for these characters. So all of us already have instilled a notion that we are already the guardians of these brands, and that responsibility we take so deeply. So when you then overlay that on the technology that we've built, I think it turns out that we not only have the brands, we have the ability and the desire to bring them into new and magical ways with the technology, and there's a deep respect because we are the brand owners. And so marrying up that technology with the brand owner is actually one of the really unique positions, which is why we feel that this was, I was about to say important, but I think it's critical that we did this to work out what is the future of IP in an era of AI.
No, really cool. Really cool. I guess, you kind of lightly mentioned around the golden record and like keeping things within, the parameters that feel right for the IP and for the characters. I would love to maybe talk around that journey internally that you've taken, that, there's obviously so many team members that are part of looking after the brand, figuring out where it goes, but then also the team and you wanting to deliver these new experiences. And I guess finding that middle ground that everyone's comfortable. So like what that journey looked like.
Yes.
But then also, you've kind of coined a new phrase now as well, which is kind of behavioural licensing. And I guess figuring out what that journey looked like and where you want to take that next too.
Absolutely. We initially started to experiment and realised we can bring these characters to life. And then simultaneously, we started seeing in the marketplace, other companies were bringing our characters to life without asking. And what we observed was off-brand experiences that did not meet our expectations. We still have IP infringement at scale occurring. It feels a little bit Napster moment. It feels a little bit, because when you look at the situation, it is a signal that there is so much love for our brands that our fans are seeking these engagements. But at the moment, because no one had come up with behavioural licensing, there was no briefcase, toolkit, structure, methodology to enable technology companies to do this. So, as a lot of technology occurs, gets created, and then the use case is put, but there wasn't a moment of finding, how do we do this officially? And so we saw external brands exploiting our IP, and we took that as a signal. Rather than playing whack-a-mole and shutting them down, we thought, we're going to have to work out how to do this. Likewise, our internal experimentations in the early days were not meeting what our expectations were. Because if you go to an LLM and tell it that you are Peppa Pig, and then you start having a conversation, you may find yourself saying, Peppa, do you like bacon? And she may say something that ends up being a little bit close to cannibalism. So we realized that whilst the technology is able, one must build on top, build certain new tools to meet the expectations that we have. And so along those steps, we really found, well, first one was, does it feel like there's a future where these characters can come to life? And we said yes, and we proved it out. And this wasn't through PowerPoint presentations. This was prototypes. For instance, my son, who's 4 years old, thinks all toys talk because all his toys talk. Again, we're not going under 13, but through experimentation, we have been placing these into what we call Fun Lab, which is our internal processing for testing of marketing campaigns, products, rules, all different use cases. And along that, we kept on finding, right, what areas do we need to build into the technology stack to make sure that we're meeting the expectations of ourselves and our fans? And along the way, the construct of the character operating system came along, and you can think of this as our tech stack that allows our characters to think, hear, speak, see, and do, both digitally and physically. And so some of those use cases are as simple as perhaps having a dynamic ebook or a way for story time with Peppa, where you're co-creating stories. All the way through to, we have a life-sized Optimus Prime that is going to be the receptionist at our new Boston office, that is able to play games with you because Optimus can see, can show you with his robotic body around what corridor to go and find people around the office. So this character operating system allows us to bring our characters to life. And then the golden record initially started as, how do we construct the perfect version of a character? And then we realized these characters exist in different universes. The Optimus Prime in G1 is different to the Optimus Prime in the Michael Bay universe. So there's different variants of our golden record. We like to go, there's a character operating system, and then there's a golden record of the character. And then all of that is expressed through the application layer. For instance, if we have Optimus Prime talking to you through a consumer campaign of some sort, or a marketing campaign, or supporting you on our Hasbro Prime website, those are applications that Optimus should be able to know about the application, know what the environment that he's existing is, and he needs to stick to that ecosystem. Likewise, Optimus Prime as the robot for our office needs to understand the layout of the office, where to go for lunch in Boston, and some of the local knowledge. So the character operating system is how we actually do the tech stack. The golden record is how we lock the personality, the lore, the moderation to that character. And then the application layer is by which how we deliver it. And this ecosystem is what we are now offering partners to utilize our characters in new and magical ways. Additionally, we're aware that this might be an interesting proposition for some partners who own IP that desire to bring their characters into this new world of magical experiences. And so we will find ourselves onboarding other IP into our ecosystem, and we are open for business. That is the most important part. This is no longer just hypothetical. We are delivering these experiences, and it's incredible.
I wanted to ask briefly, you mentioned Optimus Prime or some of your IP existing in marketing campaigns and stuff like that. So how would you sort of go about, obviously, to use your example before, Peppa Pig's not going to be the spokesperson for a bacon company, right?
Yes.
So what's the sort of mechanisms in place that your team uses to figure out what are the most appropriate sort of marriages between your IP and then, a product or a brand that wants to come and work with your characters?
Absolutely. I like to think of it as, if you contemplate walking down the street, or walking through a grocery store, or walking where products and brands exist, you likely interact with our brands already. You may see Mr. Monopoly over here, over there, but he's often static. And then if he is dynamic, then it's nearly always a pre-recorded experience of some. If I start to think about, I go to a lot of theme parks. If I start to think about walking around theme parks, there's often pre-recorded experiences. what could that mean when I can have a dynamic experience with the characters? For instance, Mr. Monopoly, one of the most beloved characters, can now come to life in everything from perhaps the call center where you're reaching out for information. Perhaps he's an assistant inside there. Perhaps when you are ordering somewhere and instead of just using a self-service kiosk, maybe Mr. Monopoly is able to assist you and guide you through that process. One of the ones that we have, which is one of my favorite experiences, we constructed a thing called Hasbro Radio. And Hasbro Radio is a 24-hour radio station that operates at our office. And all of our characters are the DJs. And we didn't come up with the shows. We simply told these characters, you run a radio station, who should run what show and at what time. And so from midnight till 6 a.m, it's Colonel Mustard with the Midnight Dossier. He plays late night jazz and unsolved mysteries. And then at 6 a.m, it's Good Morning Spudsville with Mr. Potato Head. 8 a.m, Optimus Prime with the primetime morning rollout. And then in the background, we have a random number generator so that 1 in 10 times they do a weather report. And then in the afternoon, Mr. Monopoly, because we've connected him to the stock exchanges, he does live announcements of share prices. This is live information being delivered. Now, one of the funny things is not only do these characters have their own flavour of music taste, for instance, sometimes Mr. Monopoly likes to play yacht rock. These characters not only can decide on the music, but you can go up and request songs as well. And so a while ago, I went over to it and I went up and I asked for a dedication from Megatron. And I put my name in, I typed Grey, and then I selected the song and I selected Wonderwall by Oasis because it's a banger. The current song that was playing went through and then Megatron came on over the speakers in our office and he said, up next for the pathetic human known as Grey is a song by Oasis titled Wonderwall. Isn't it just like a human to wonder about a wall? Today's gonna be the day. And it's these type of experiences that we have built a lot, but we don't know how or where the end of the extremes are. So when we think about how are these characters going to be delivered across marketing campaigns, across new interactions, we have ways that we think can be valuable to brands, consumers, fans, but we think we've only experimented with the beginning of it, which is another reason that we're so excited to invite people to reach out to us and begin prototyping, experimenting, and finding ways that our characters can serve them and their fans and their customers, because we may not know where the walls are on the possibility. I'm pretty sure that we haven't found anywhere close to where the extreme are. So yeah, we're really excited for it.
You just did a impression of Megatron, and it got me thinking about the voice of Optimus Prime, which obviously, like you're talking about, there's different iterations of them throughout different franchise versions of Optimus Prime, but everyone has sort of the one that they bring up in their head, right?
Yes.
So how have you been working with talent to create a sort of that golden sort of baseline of who that character is through the voice? Because that's obviously a really important part of bringing these characters to life.
You're absolutely right. When you think about these characters, don't you immediately for some of them just go, yeah, that voice. I know that voice and I know who that is. And then some characters you don't. But the ones that you do, we have worked specifically with them. For instance, Megatron, Frank, Optimus Prime, Peter Cullen. We are working with talent, and we're really happy to say that we began working with talent before we even went out to the market, making sure that we're compensating them. And along the way, we did have to find out, what does this new behavioural licensing mean in terms of compensation for talent? It's been critical for us to get that right. And I'm so proud to say the recording sessions that we've had so far, we've done Starscream, Megatron. After the sessions, the reference points that we got, there was a beautiful statement from Frank around how wonderful it was to do this new recording session where it was just absolutely focused on the character. And the interesting part was we had the characters help us draft those scripts as well. So there's this lovely little Easter egg that the script that was read by the talent was actually co-drafted by that character themselves. And so we have placed a deep importance in making sure that we appropriately compensate our talent, and for us, delivering talent new ways that they can receive revenue for experiences that were not possible before. The amount of lines that would be needed to create an infinite amount of dialogue is simply near impossible. So we think of this also through the lens of these are experiences that were not possible until this new technology came about.
I have a question more around getting the team bought into it, because obviously, there's 1,000,001 infringements that are going on. AI is now, making it super easy to create content, click of a finger. So how has it been internally? Are you guys obviously thinking about the fact that it's more just a case of, if the official, license is available to people, that the majority will interact with it if you can get the structure right, that people will. And then obviously you'll still have the kind of more malicious infringement and it still needs the whack-a-mole. But do you think it's more around finding that balance and giving creators and fans to some degree the way to interact properly with the official IP, and yet probably the way that IP owners have been doing it in the past hasn't given them that opportunity?
Absolutely. The signal that our characters are being infringed, think of that through the lens. There is one way to think, well, that's an infringement and we need to take some legal obligations on it. Or you can observe it through the lens of this is a gift that our fans recognize these brands enough that they want to interact with them. And that's why we're constructing ways that those who have characters in marketplace that are interacting at the moment, we would like to work with them in order to provide the correct version of the character. Because I think not only is it poor form that there is infringement, it becomes worse when it's infringement and it's not even a good Optimus Prime, or it's not even the right version of Starscream. Like, they're saying things that are off-brand, out of canon. So that's why we think of it through two ways. One, we are very lucky that our fans want to interact with these characters. Two, it's not reaching our expectations of what we think that character and that experience should be, which is why we took the time to create this infrastructure, and we constructed it in a way that these partners will be able to utilize by connecting to our character OS, or we will run methods of on-prem with them in order to make sure that our characters are represented in the correct way. And also, that then means the talent will be able to be appropriately compensated along the way as well.
Cool. So we've clearly talked around the radio stations. We've talked around, you're obviously bringing it from physical experience side too. So I guess, you've talked around the theme parks and I guess delivering contextual kind of experiences. So, but you also don't know where it could go. We've obviously talked around some of the parameters that you've put in place as well. What do you see is next for this as well? So you've obviously got the behavioural licensing side of things. You've got hundreds of IPs that you could potentially work with. Are you focusing on just a few now with the idea of rolling it out to a wider range soon?
Yes. We've started with 12 characters at the moment, and that's across Transformers, Mr. Potato Head, the cast of Clue. One of them's a murderer. Look out. So we've started with all of these characters, and you're absolutely right. We have vaults full of IP that can be brought to life. Even characters that are obscure in those universes but have deep fan bases. So we see a future where in time, absolutely, this becomes a scale play. In the early days, we are looking to deliver these characters through high quality experiences. So that will maintain focus in the beginning. Over time, we will onboard other people's IP because this is a very hard infrastructure to build, and we see the value in providing. We already have a lot of inbound and outbound licensing with our partners, and so we may find ourselves in similar scenarios. And then the experiences that can be delivered range everything from, I think about our industry has always utilised the technology and the mediums available at the time to deliver the best experience possible. And that's from everything from, Mr. Potato Head actually started as individual pieces, and it was BYO potato. You had to bring your own potato and you just push the pieces into the potato, and then it received its plastic form. And you can think about the early days of animation progressing through to where it is, and then movies. And I think of ourselves still in that responsible position of we are matching the available technologies and mediums of our time, trying to construct magical experiences. So there are many, many potential opportunities of ways that these characters can come to life. But I immediately just think of what are the potential learning or education capabilities? What are the ways that we can enhance moments that are a bit dull? And if you think about the layer of voice and how much you interact with technology through voice at the moment, not just through the voice devices that we have in our house, but how we interact with our phones. I point down to my phone. Some of our characters exist in phone numbers that we've created, and I sometimes just walk around and have conversations with our characters just to get their point of view of maybe I'm somewhere and want to understand what they would think about a situation. These characters in my mind, they're alive. And if you take it as true that then the characters are alive, it's then for us almost as agents of the characters to contemplate, well, where can we bring them to service? How can we put them to work? And so, there's experiences that we know we can deliver already, but I'm really excited for what the potential of our partners is as well.
When you talk about educational, I just flashed on, I had this VHS growing up called Donald Duck in Math Magic Land.
Hey!
It was the trippiest, it just bizarre video ever, and I hate math, but it makes me think about the ways that you make things accessible as well. Things that might be harder to understand or contemplate or manage. And by bringing characters that are beloved or, have create a warmth within you to these other realms of either education or you're talking about, the possibilities of that unlocks, I think, is quite astounding, actually.
It's incredible and very fun. It feels like was that VHS just about imaginary numbers and so on?
There was a whole scene where he does there's a narrator, and I can't remember for the life of me who the narrator is, but for example, Donald Duck plays billiards, and so they start talking about angles, and so when you hit a pool ball off of a corner here and it goes here, what is that angle? And then there was another scene where he has a harp and he cuts the strings in different points, and it shows you how the pitch changes based on how long the string is for vibration. And I still remember this from when I watched this VHS when I was 9. You know what I mean? I'm curious, and you talked about, and again, with the caveat, obviously, these aren't the experiences that you're offering, but through the experimentation, whether Peppa Pig at some point should say, actually ask your teacher, those things. So how do you put guardrails in? Because obviously there's a lot of, there's room for error with these LLM situations. So what are the guardrails that you have in place to make sure that not only are the characters adhering to what they should do for their personalities and their universes, but also being responsible to the person that's asking them questions?
It's terrific. We have inbound and outbound moderation, and this moderation is actually contextual moderation as well. When I interact with a character, we are observing what am I saying, and does that match up to the application of where that character is existing in that moment? And so we find ourselves, that's how we started to decide, Peppa probably shouldn't be able to respond to things about the Large Hadron Collider. Should she know that that is even involved in science? Should she reference? So on this inbound, we look contextually at what's being said. Does it match what we would consider the expectations of the application where the character's existing? And then, of course, we do the industry standard checks against all of the moderation layers that you should be checking for across safety, across hate speech, across all of the, luckily we now have some good industry benchmarks, but they still don't match what we need. So we then constructed more agents that are still observing for additional reasons and premise about, is this okay? If it matches our check and we receive sort of a green light, then we pass it into the character operating system. It is performed against the LLM and the golden record in order for the character to respond. And then we have a series of moderation checks on the outbound as well. So we think of it as kind of like a bouncer. There's someone at the front door, there's someone at the back door. We're making sure that what is being sort of engaged with the character matches what we would expect for that situation. And does the outbound, is the character speaking safely? Are they speaking in law, in canon, in the ecosystem that we would want? And as you can imagine, that becomes very, very heavily controlled at certain areas. And then some collectible adult experiences we adjust. You know, we go from mild to wild for certain experiences.
You're much further down the line than a lot of IP owners and a lot of brands right now. So I'd love to talk a bit more around, I guess, your innovation strategy and I guess your team at 6-4, because it's its own little unit, maybe not a little unit, but a big unit, being able to test and trial and experiment with these kind of things. So if you were, you're obviously further down the line than a lot of these brands. Like if someone was looking to, start these tests with their own IP, like what would your first kind of steps be for them?
Experimentation. And I'll run you through how we found ourselves getting here, because there was a lot of people that supported this along the way. When I think about our CEO, Chris Cox, it really started from the top. He had vision for what was potentially capable because he himself had experimented with the technologies. He understood what can a voice experience be like, not just through the lens of using ChatGPT advanced voice mode, but interacting with 11 Labs. And all the way right from the beginning, from those early days of the Trivial Pursuit experiments, he was supportive. And then across the business, we had many, many team members who put their hands up and said, I'd love to join this experimentation. I'd love to. And in those early days, when it's 2022, 2023, we're all just testing and every day being like, oh, I found this. And then a week later being like, that company shut down and doesn't exist anymore. And there's a new tool over here. And so the second part that I would say is allow the flexibility, knowing that whatever you learn, it may only be ripe for 1 or 2 or 3 months, and you're going to have to evolve. And if you consider that a gift, I really think it's almost like Christmas time every week. We get just technological gifts given to us across the world. Isn't it magic that these things are not being locked behind enterprise? Like the LLM providers, the voice generators, all of these tools are available to everyone. And so how I think we got here was allowing our imagination to contemplate what is possible. And through my own experimentation, by background, I'm a robotic engineer and I studied AI ML. And so it felt real, like I know I use that Christmas line, but it genuinely just felt like, wow, we don't have to use linear algebra to interact with machine learning anymore. We just need to hit an API and sort of become more a practitioner of technology. And so going through, and I think there was a really important moment where during the debrief of Ouija, where we were talking about how we felt about the launch, our CEO said, right, I would like for more experimentation to occur. And I would like people to allow themselves to put their hands up and get some digital repetitions in working on these projects. And then there was projects like Trivial Pursuit, where we had people across the business, from Hasbro, Wizards of the Coast, people who were saying, oh, I'd love to help out. We had so many people and we were all learning along the way. And I think everyone felt like we didn't know where the limits of the technology were. I'll tell you one thing, actually, not knowing the limits of the technology, we were bumping up against token limits. We had to deploy models across the world and then construct like round robin systems to send Ouija LLM calls to different models, because at the time, Azure, we were running our GPT models through Azure. They couldn't keep up with the amount of tokens that we were spending because it was the early days. Now they can take just almost an unlimited amount. So what I would recommend to people is contemplate, what are the pain points? What are the frictions? What are the moments of unexpected delight? Allow yourself the imagination of what is possible in your ecosystem, your brand, your IP, what you're doing, and just start building. Anyone who doesn't have software ability is not limited by that anymore. If you have the ability to access a ChatGPT, a Claude code, and if you can type, or I don't even type on my computer anymore. I hit the dictate button and I speak to my computer, and then I construct. What do I need it to build? We have a prototype a few minutes later. I think that is the most important part, and really knowing that it's through experimentation, and you're going to fail and you're going to get it wrong. I feel there's so much truth to that, because a lot of what we've talked about today with Peppa is actually experimentation that will not lead to live experiences at the moment. But we had to go through, we had to see, what is it? It's great, but it's just not where we want to go for the moment. So everyone who builds experiments is going to find that they're probably just stepping on the shoulders of their own experiments over time to get to somewhere new. And I don't know, I just think this is one of the most... If you have a vision, you can bring it to life at the moment in a way that was not possible before. We refer to it as speed to vision. We'll sit in meetings and someone has an idea, someone's then rapidly building the prototype. In a few minutes, we're either experiencing experiencing a character interaction, experiencing it through the lens of a customer, through a brand partner. It's incredible.
And being able to, feel it and experience it gives you that awareness of whether it is the right fit for what you're looking for or not. And I think, as you say, that speed to be able to spin something up and then chat about it as a team and then decide, like, that was a much longer process not that long ago. Being able to have that acceleration just accelerates the innovation that teams are able to do, right? So
the difference between having a PowerPoint that says, here's our vision of what this website might look like, or here's a way that we want to interact with this character. The difference between seeing that or just going like, hey, Optimus, I need you to, and having Optimus interact with you is night and day. And I very much lean into show, don't say. Yep.
You're obviously open for business now.
Yes.
You've built the infrastructure. So it's a bit of a change, I guess, from, you've had the brands and the IP, but now also you're being a service provider to other brands and IP. So I'm intrigued, like, from that perspective, like, how are you planning on working with those different IPs? Are there any that you're not necessarily focusing on for now, or ones that you are focusing on, or what's kind of the end goal for that?
Yes. One of the strongest partnerships that we have at the moment that we're really excited about is with 11 Labs. We partnered with 11 Labs to place our voices into their iconic marketplace so that their customers that have ways that they want to deliver these characters out into the world are able to do so. When I then think about partners looking to create experiences, we contemplate ourselves not so much as a software as a service, more of a character as a service.
Like an ambassador almost.
This is the thing. If you can contemplate, I've created something, but I've just given it a voice that doesn't have a personality, or I've, a lot of the times, constructed a personality, but as I mentioned with those early prototypes, there's something missing with those. Those are experiences that can now be reached out and we can deliver our characters into there. We see this very similar to a traditional licensing in that, yes, there are aspects of deals that need to be constructed, but the difference for us is we're constructing deals about what occurs at runtime, how does this dynamically allow experiences, and additionally, there are still times where we're going to be constructing experiences that aren't dynamic, using pre-generated assets that were impossible to do so. And I'll give you an example. Imagine before we were talking about a dynamic storybook, there are times where you may want that to be pre-generated for an offline experience, but it still might have 10,000 different ways that the story navigates. And that's too much to be recorded otherwise. Or maybe there are ways that you want to deliver experiences that were not possible before, and we are here for that. Predominantly in these early days, we're focused on voice. So when I think about the capabilities, we're predominantly focused on how does the character think? What is the voice of the character? And does the character need to hear you or receive text or have API access? In time, we will find ourselves coming about with a point of view of what does this mean for pixel generation? But before we get there, it'll probably be rigged assets of how we bring our characters to life visually in some ways. We're still working through those. We see those on the roadmap. And then long term, I'll go back to that overview of if you take it as true that our characters are alive and they can think, hear, speak, see, and do, where would you put them to work?
Really cool. And I guess you've already started to have some of those conversations with brands and with IPs that maybe aren't as far down the road as you guys are. So have there been any conversations that you have that you just wouldn't advise them to be doing, or that wouldn't make sense kind of given, you know, the journey that you guys have been on?
Yes, we will, in the same way that we have one of the strongest licensing businesses in the world, that will continue. And what's come along with that is the responsibility of making sure that our license opportunities match up to the brand. So we won't be changing that point of view at all. We will still be respecting the brands through the lens that we're the stewards and the brand owners. And so, yes, we will find ourselves having to politely reject or politely say maybe now's not the right time for that experience. And that just comes about because that is simultaneously already happening across our licensing business, because we must match up opportunities with the right experience.
Maybe to kind of round out, looking in the crystal ball a little bit, like if you guys get this really right, what do you think it looks like in the next, let's give it one year and then maybe 5-year timeframes? Like what do you hope it becomes?
Yes, I think in the early days you'll be experiencing some of our major characters through voice. Now, whether that serves purpose through internal facing that are now external facing experiences. You know, what would it mean to interact with one of our characters through maybe some websites that we already own? Then taking it the next step, what would it mean to have products that deliver dynamic experiences? Then through the next lens, what would it mean to experience these characters where a partner, so someone else is actually the enabler of the experience, but those experiences are serving their customers and their fans? And then on a 5-year horizon, I hope to be walking around theme parks talking and interacting to our characters, because in those instances, there are so many moments where I just contemplate yourself walking around already. Our characters exist in the world around us, but you don't get to interact with them. It's unilateral. You get to experience where we have placed them. Maybe it's a poster, maybe it's a video, maybe it's a marketing campaign, but you unilaterally are receiving them. You're not experiencing them. And so in 5 years, as interesting as it sounds, I think interacting with our characters will not be the crazy statement of me sitting here going, I think Optimus Prime is alive. You will be saying, I think Optimus Prime is alive.
How do you see those dynamic experiences benefiting, or do you think it will make it easier for audiences to build that connection with an IP? Like, obviously there's tons of ways that people are interacting with it now, but do you think that gear change just makes it that much easier for them to build a fandom around the branded IP?
Yeah, potentially. I would take it from two sides. One, there is about Hasbro enabling its IP for the era of AI to continue to deliver experiences. And then another lens is our partners that have experiences that are unmatched with characters or can be enhanced. Now, just think about a lot of the ways that we're already interacting with voice agents, with voice assistants, where we're currently having moments of boring interactions that we have to have because we happen to be doing a certain experience at that moment, but there's no interactivity. I think that's the way that partners can think of this, through the lens of like, geez, I'd like to deliver something that's a bit more magical, knowing that our characters already exist in so many ways to try and enhance our partners' products and services already.
Amazing. I think it's so exciting what you guys are doing. And I think the journey that you've been on is a really good journey for people to follow along with as well. So, Gray, thank you so much. Gabriella, thanks for joining me, and thanks everyone for listening.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And if anyone wants to reach out, hello@sixthwallstudio.com, or more information is available at sixthwallstudio.com as well.
All right, you heard it. All right, thanks everyone. Catch you soon.
Optimus says bye as well.